Good evening and welcome to the Somers Partners in Prevention 5th Annual Community Forum. I'm Kathy Cucciarella. I am the chairperson for the Somers Partners in Prevention, and I'm also the Drug-Free Communities Coordinator for the Somers Partners in Prevention. We started doing these forums approximately, well, actually 5 years ago, as a means by which we could gather the community for the purposes of education, raising awareness, and having conversations about top substance trends in our town, our community, our state, and our nation. Now, even though this is the partners' 5th year in having the forum, one of the big news items that I do want to point out, it's actually the 50th year that the coalition has been in existence since 1969. So stay tuned for some celebrations this year to help us celebrate the 50th anniversary. The coalition began and operated under several names, and some will date: the Somers Narcotics Council, and it changed to the Somers Substance Abuse. But back in 2014, we decided that we were going to change our name because we realized we couldn't do this alone. So we decided, and we worked together with students and teachers and community members, and we came up with a title called Somers Partners in Prevention, and that's who we are today, because we couldn't do it alone. With that, basically our team, and I call it a team, is we're comprised of community members, institutions, volunteer groups, within many of whom are here this evening, and we all are working towards the same goal: to raise awareness and educate our community and keep our community safe. Our mission's pretty simple. We want to build a safer community and address risky behaviors through our community advocacy, hope, and awareness. And today, we continue to look towards concerned citizens and anyone that really wants to step in and help us in that mission. A bit of news, our next big news is, since our last forum last year, we, the Somers Partners of Prevention and the Somers Central School District, co-wrote a grant, and we were awarded a Drug-Free Communities grant. And what that means is that we have set certain goals for this community that we are promising to deliver on, but we've received a grant in the amount of $125,000, which is a sizable grant. We're excited about that grant. There's a lot that we can do for this community with that grant. This grant's, as long as we continue to improve upon what we're doing in our community, write our progress reports to DC, we will have this grant for 5 years, and then hopefully we will reapply and have it for another 5 years. And by then, hopefully we'll have some sustainability built into our community to continue the good works. That being said, there's a lot of folks that work behind the scenes, and I wanted to take a few minutes to acknowledge them. My SPP team is here. We call Somers Partners in Prevention SPP. So if my team can kind of stand, some are in the back. Carol, Mark's here. Denise is in the back in the purple. Jeff is here running all around. The school district, Ray is in the back. Our town supervisor, I saw him sneak in because there was a meeting. Rick Morrissey's in the back. Our councilmen are all here. Tony's here. I saw Bill Faulkner, I saw Rich is here, Tom is here in the back. So again, you can see this community. We have our chief of police here and his officers. We really rally as a community here. So I want to say thank you to everyone that's here tonight. I know there are some people that couldn't be here tonight from prior commitments, but you know, I truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank everybody for their efforts in working to raise awareness and keep our town as safe as possible for our entire community. That being said, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank some folks that helped Somers Partners in Prevention bring Dr. Kevin Sabat here. We have Drug Crisis in Our Backyard who helped us out. Carol's here. Steve is in the back there, so thank you. Our dear friends who own El Forno, Rick and Susan DiNardo, they helped us bring Kevin as well. And We just were there for dinner, and Susan's sister's here, so thank you. But they are busy over at the restaurant and a little short-staffed. So we thank you, Rick and Susan, for helping us out as well, Somers Partners in Prevention and Somers Central School District, and also the Drug-Free Communities Grant. So, so thank you to all of you. So now, just moving on to tonight, the way we're going to structure this is Kevin's going to come up in a few minutes, but if we could hold the Q&A to the end, that would be great, and then we can just have the questions, raise your hand and we'll call upon you. But tonight we have the honor and the pleasure of having Dr. Kevin Sabet here tonight to speak on marijuana, the health, safety, and social concerns. And I guess the marijuana of yesteryear is not the marijuana of today, so you're going to learn a lot about that tonight. Dr. Sabet is the president of SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which he co-founded in the year 2013 along with Patrick Kennedy and David Frum. He was the former senior drug policy advisor to Presidents Obama, Clinton, and Bush. And he is an author and a consultant and continues with his team at SAM to promote healthy marijuana policies that do not involve legalizing drugs. So please help me welcome Dr. Kevin Sabet.
Well, it's really great. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and everybody here who's made the coalition what it is. Congratulations on the DFC grant. That's a really big deal. That's actually a grant administered from my old office, and many applicants. It's a very rigorous application process, and you really should be commended. The school should be commended. The different sectors, law enforcement that's here should be commended. The business partners. And anytime you tie in, come to give a talk with Italian food, I'll be there. So a little hint, I'm a cheap date in that way. But really, it does take all the sectors of the community. So thank you, Kathy, for pulling it all together, and you're doing your and the school, the principal, incredible work together to make this happen. Because we're really in an incredible time in our history right now with the issue of substance abuse. And if you just kind of zoom out a little bit, we're going to talk. We'll zoom into the marijuana issue, but we'll talk about. You can go ahead and put up the first slide, and then I'll go forward with it. Well, I wanted to just, let's situate where we are here with substances in our country and in our state. And by the way, it's great to be giving a talk here in my state, in New York, where I live. And I don't live too far away, but seems like a world away, Manhattan, I guess. But it's beautiful up here. But it's nice to be here in the home state. And there's so many people, Carol, there's so many people here that we've been working with, especially recently, and I've been honored to be working with you. When you look at drugs today, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Obviously, the opioid epidemic is something that everybody is talking about. We can all agree, and for good reason. We have more people dying now from opioids than we ever have. It's not the first opioid epidemic in our nation's history. We've had 3 of them before. This is the most deadly because it's driven by deadlier concentrations of opioids, things we've never had before, like the fentanyls, which are a class of synthetic opioids, where basically you take the opioid and you make it even deadlier in a laboratory. And that has driven this massive problem. But we can't forget about the other drugs, and we can't only look at one drug in isolation. We are here to talk about, I think, the most misunderstood of all drugs, marijuana. We're also here to talk about the most prevalent of all drugs, marijuana. As bad as the opioid epidemic is, when you look at 14-year-olds, we're not talking about opioids. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I know the grants say we have to talk about it all the time, but if you're talking about 14-year-olds, opioids is like 0.2% at the highest. I mean, that's because you don't start substance abuse with opioids. It does not work that way. And you start with the most available and normalized substances, which in our country happen to be alcohol and marijuana. And thankfully, we used to say tobacco. We don't say that anymore because of the progress we've made, but unfortunately, it's come back in its second reincarnation with vapes and the vaporizing industry, which is the same thing as the tobacco industry. By the way, big tobacco is making more money than ever now, so don't feel sorry for them thinking that they've gone down in revenues. They're doing just fine. And we're dealing now with these drugs that I call are the starter drugs, which are marijuana, tobacco in the form of vaporizing, and alcohol. And I don't think they get as much attention because they're not as sexy to talk about as the other drugs. And they have different, they affect us differently. But if you think about alcohol for a second, you might be thinking, well, alcohol is legal, so maybe other drugs should be too. And my perspective on that is, listen, alcohol is not legal because it's safe, right? We don't say in our community, if only more people were drinking, we'd be a better community. I don't think anyone's ever said that. I don't think our people serving in law enforcement, and we're very thankful for your service, I don't think they say, you know what this town needs is more drinking. No mother says what my husband and kids need are more alcohol. Alcohol is legal, folks, because of an accident of history. Alcohol is legal because 5,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks just, sort of made it widespread, and they started using it, and now 70% of Americans drink. And it costs us a lot of money to drink. For every dollar in revenue, we spend 15 in social costs. There are more young African Americans in prison due to alcohol-related crimes than all drugs combined, which we forget about that because we don't think alcohol is a drug. It is. It just happens to be legal. That doesn't mean it's not a drug. But if you look at the effect it's had, it hasn't been great. But it's a deal we've made, and we're moving on. Okay. The train has left the station on alcohol. We can prevent it. We should prevent it. We need to make sure, we're here, I don't know, I'm not going to put you boys on the spot and ask you what your names are, but this is why we're all doing what we're doing over here. And alcohol is often that starter drug, but now more and more it's marijuana because of the message that's being sent out there. And I have a lot of slides to show you about a lot of issues with regards to marijuana, but what I'll say now, as Kathy already said, is this is not the weed that most of you remember. And I know none of you ever tried it in your entire life, so I'm not going to point that out. But if you did, unless it was in the last year, I promise you what we're talking about and what these kids are exposed to, the cartridges, the dabs, the gummy bears, the chocolate bars, the ice creams, the sodas, is not the weed that we sort of remember from the Summer of Love, and we're not that far from Woodstock, right? So Woodstock, stuff like that. This is a totally different drug. It's different for a few reasons. We've become better farmers in our country. We've just been much better at agriculture than we ever were. So we know how to grow THC-rich plants. THC is what gets you high. THC is the chemical in marijuana. There are thousands, but it's the one that gets you high, that binds to the receptors in your brain and body. And we've learned to manipulate that and get it a lot stronger. And so the marijuana we're talking about is having vastly different effects than it did even 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago. So I think a lot of the American people now are walking into this discussion of marijuana and saying, well, it's, sort of, we used it in the 60s and not a big deal, and alcohol is legal, so, I don't know, maybe we'll get some revenue from it. And I'm here to tell you that that's a false narrative. And the other false narrative is that we either have to arrest people and throw them in prison and give them a criminal record for making a mistake, for smoking a joint, or we have to legalize drugs. And I'm here to tell you that that's also a false dichotomy. We don't need to arrest a 13-year-old who's made a bad choice. We need to get them help. But we also don't need to have the store down the street from school selling pot gummy bears as the answer to that. And unfortunately, that is the dichotomy that they're setting up in Albany and in other places. And I think that is really unfortunate because we as a country have been totally blindsided by the addiction for profit industries in our country, which are alcohol, tobacco, and the pharmaceutical industry. They are laughing all the way to the bank. They never put public health ahead of their personal profit. And I don't know why we think marijuana will be any different, folks. The reason we're talking about legalization is not because there are a lot of people in prison for smoking a joint. Guess what? There aren't any. The reason we're talking about legalization is because there's money in it for a small number of people, and that money isn't for towns. In fact, towns are going to be paying for it, not getting money from it. You will be paying for more law enforcement to detect the DUI drivers. You will be paying for more school resource officers to deal with the fact that in Colorado, marijuana is now it wasn't ever before. Now it's the #1 reason for citation in middle and high schools. And it's legal. You're supposed to be 21. Why is that happening? Because it's been normalized. The black market is thriving, and the localities are paying for it. And guess what? The revenue is barely paying for anything. In Colorado and Denver, they had their first teacher strike in 25 years 2 weeks ago. And I was asking, where's the marijuana money? That was the promise. They haven't seen a dime. They are paying for this issue, not getting money for it. And it can be seductive in today's era of trying to get more revenues and finding more revenues to say, well, it's happening anyway. And I get that it is happening. I'm not in denial. It's happening here. I hate to say it. It's happening in your next door community. It's happening in the other community. It's happening. But it's a fallacy to say that because it's happening, we should get some tax revenue. That's not going to happen if this happens, if legalization happens. What will happen is that you will have a thriving underground market and a legal market, the worst of both worlds. Wall Street investment into the branding and marketing of marijuana, which is what this whole thing is about, and the underground market, because nobody is saying that we should be able to legally sell to these kids over here. So who's going to sell to them and their friends? Well, the same people that sell it to them now. I don't mean to target you guys, by the way, sorry. We're all here for you, it's true. I mean it. So that's really what we have to have a discussion about, and I'm hoping to take questions. I want to go through a few slides, and even though it may not be so easy to see. I left the Obama administration in 2011, and I said we need to have an organization. I got Patrick Kennedy on the left, David Frum on the right, and the leading scientists of the country together to say, we don't want to put people in prison, but we do not want to commercialize another substance. There is a big industry out there that wants to cash in, and they need to be held into account. So that's why we started SAM, and we have offices in New York and DC and other places. We work with scientists. You know, I went to all the major medical associations, and I said, well, do you have a position on this? And they said, yeah, doesn't anybody, everybody, we have a position on our website. We have peer-reviewed journal articles. And the reality is, not every American is reading a peer-reviewed journal article in a medical journal to find out what's going on with marijuana. And kids aren't either. What are kids doing? And their parents, by the way, because the parents are often much more to blame, I would say. What are they doing? They're Googling, is marijuana addictive? They're not Googling reading the Journal of the American Medical Association. They're Googling, is marijuana addictive? And they're getting search results paid for by the pot industry. That's what's informing this right now. And that is a huge part of the misinformation that's out there, is we're not getting the science out. And so when people that I used to work for in the last administration before this president say that they are pro-science, pro-environment, pro all this scientific thing, but then also pro-legalization, it doesn't make any sense. Because every major medical association and scientific group in this country and around the world has said, this stuff ain't good for you, and we should not legalize it and commercialize it. That's the scientific opinion and the scientific fact. And so there's a huge cognitive dissonance, I think, among a lot of people, and a lot of people, unfortunately, of people that I used to work with in the White House. I hate to say, because they're very smart, but they have been seduced by a lot of these arguments. And when they hear 5 minutes of a talk like this, most of them do change their mind, but then they say they never heard that before. That's why these forums are very, very important. As I said, I think it's a false dichotomy to say you either lock people up in prison or this issue of social justice, I am sensitive to. I think it's important. I do think that we need to care about social justice, and I think that an arrest record can hurt a kid's chances of, going to college or being in the legal economy. But the idea that legalizing drugs brings social justice is the ultimate falsehood in this discussion. Because I'd like to ask, how has alcohol been with social justice? Where's the social justice there? There are 8 times as many liquor stores in our country in poorer communities of color than in upper class communities, because this is an industry that targets the most vulnerable. Where did the pharmaceutical industry go first in the 1990s? They went to Appalachia. Why? Because you had rural, poor, they were white in this case, communities, coal miners who had pain. They also had employer health care coverage, who could afford the pills. And they targeted all of Appalachia. That's where the pill problem happened in the first place. You go to the most vulnerable. That's what these industries do. And the idea that somehow the poor in our society are going to benefit from legalization is, if we wouldn't be crying about it, we'd be laughing. It's incredibly wrong to say that. Because let me tell you, the kid from the Bronx or from Brooklyn or from Yonkers who gets a pot license because everyone's saying we're going to do equity, and that's what they're saying in Albany. They're saying, we're going to do it the right way, Kevin. We're not going to make the mistakes of those backward Coloradans. We're New Yorkers. We know how to do it all right. And I love that pride. I love being in the state because that's awesome. But sometimes it's misplaced, I think. And I think in this case, it's misplaced. Because I don't care if you're New Yorkers or you're, Londoners or you're Coloradans, the way the market works is very, very simple. The big guys win. I hate to say it. And so the issue is the idea that the kid from Yonkers, if you give him a pot license, is going to make money in this environment against Philip Morris, which is the creator of Marlboro, which is investing billions in this industry right now, that they're going to compete against them or the pharma industry, which is now getting involved, or the alcohol industry, the largest brand of alcohol consortium of brands is called Constellation. They're now $2 billion invested in pot. So I hate to say it, but that kid from Yonkers that doesn't have a GED, but gets a pot license because the state says we're going to be fair, is not going to compete against the big guys. And it's not only too bad for him, it's the idea that we only care about social justice for that guy in Yonkers because, in the context of marijuana, I think is also, by the way, slightly offensive. It's like, can we care about it in a different context? Does it have to be marijuana that we say we're going to give them equity? I mean, on so many levels, this is backwards. But that is the way it's being presented as a social justice issue, but it's the opposite of that. And to be very clear, as I was saying earlier, we're not talking about this, right? We're not talking, when I say marijuana, you probably, and I wouldn't blame you for it, but most people think of this image, right? They think of a joint, but that isn't what we're talking about today. We're talking about these products that are trying to attract, the developing brain, the brain that's, I'm not going to age anybody in this room other than these two I've already aged, but under 20. Under 25, under 30. That brain is attracted to bright colors, candy, these kinds of things. That's why they watch cartoons more than maybe you do. Well, there's a biological reason behind it. Lucky Charms commercials aren't aimed at you anymore. I am sorry to break it to you. You're not the target audience for that. It's the same kind of thing here. And they're getting away with this. These are all products in legal states. And you might say, we're going to do it different in New York. I love it. It's going to be the one time we get it right. Why is it going to be different? When the special interests come in, it's over. And I've worked for Republicans and Democrats, and I can tell you they're both guilty of the special interest lobby. That revolving door, boy, it's expensive, but they have the money, and it's very fast, and they're in and out, and constantly the lobbying machine. It's why, do you know that we haven't, our tax for alcohol in this country, our federal tax for alcohol, is a fifth of what it was than during the Korean War? The alcohol has a very good lobby. It's why the pharmaceutical industry has made hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide selling a product, you get ready for this, opioids, long-acting opioids, that have no scientific basis for long-term pain efficacy. Did you know OxyContin there are no studies, zero, showing long-term pain efficacy? It was meant for short-term hospitals. It was meant for acute pain under the doctor's supervision. That's why these drugs that's what opiates were meant for in these forms. So what happens when you have a good lobby and a good lobbyist is you don't have these regulations that we are all thinking in our infinite wisdom right now. We can construct really good regulations around this. No, we can't. It's a fool's errand. Some people will try, and they are genuinely trying, but they are not going to be there to compete with these industries. That is a huge, huge worry I have. The former CEO of the company that brought us OxyContin is now started up his own pot company. He left the pharma industry. And that's what it's about. It's guys in suits. It's not the old hippies with the, you have to get the image of the hippies with the hemp t-shirts and that kind of thing out of your head. Because let me tell you, they've cut their hair and they've gotten suits and they are not that anymore. They are not the ones you remember from Woodstock. They've grown up. And they have Ivy League MBAs as well. That's my worry with this. I don't want to put a kid in prison for pot, but the answer is not Wall Street. The answer is not giving it to these corporate interests who will absolutely be benefiting and profiting off of other people's frailties. Let's see here. Should work. Oh, here we go. When I ask people what does the fastest growing drug dealer in America look like, they usually don't think of an image like this, but this is true. Again, we're talking about the guys that are in it for the money, and that's really one of my principal worries. And I feel like in many ways we're living in 100 years ago, but for tobacco. In 1919, we had the beginnings of the tobacco industry. We had every single star in the silent films and others using, smoking. And it was an accepted thing. And I feel like for marijuana, we're living in that era right now, 100 years later, where the acceptance is just huge. Let me tell you a little secret about tobacco. This may sound controversial, but it's true. Before the invention of the automatic cigarette making machine, which was only in the late 1800s. Tobacco itself has been around for thousands of years. It's been used for thousands of years. We never had lung cancer related to tobacco before the invention of the cigarette. The cigarette is only from the late 1800s. It's so new. And when we invented the automatic cigarette making machine in that era, and big tobacco started in Madison Avenue, and you watch Mad Men and that kind of thing started, the marketing machine, that is when we had the deaths pile up. And we're all talking about the opiate crisis, but let me tell you something. 8 times as many people died from tobacco-related causes last year than for opioids. But let's think about why that is. So there's 2 really important lessons here. One, tobacco was not deadly before the industry got a hold of it. It's pretty amazing. You might be thinking, well, why? Just because the cigarette, they added things to it, they added nicotine to it, they added carcinogens to it, they got actors, they had widespread use. It went from pipe use, small populations here and there, to widespread use in the 1900s, right, with the cigarette. Now, we've learned our lesson 100 years later. We're still paying the price. 400,000 people dead last year, as I said. 420,000 people dead from cigarettes, from tobacco-related causes. So that's the first lesson, is that an industry made tobacco deadly. That's interesting. The second interesting part is that if I were to say, if someone had a gun to your head and they said, you have to take one of these drugs, or I'm going to kill you, so you have to take one of them. One of them is one cigarette, and one of them is a needle of heroin. Obviously, we're all going to pick the cigarette because the heroin, one dose can kill you. And with a cigarette, the harm is over time, right? Of course, we would all choose the cigarette. But to society, overall, because of the deaths, and remember, for every death, the families that are affected, the neighbors, the families, the loved ones, we cannot forget them. It's not just the person who fell, it's the others around them. If I said cigarette or heroin, obviously you're going to pick a cigarette. We all would. We should, because the heroin, one dose, right, can kill you. But to society, that cigarette has been far more deadly than heroin. What is the difference? Especially if heroin's more deadly to the individual. The difference is we've marketed it, promoted it, normalized it, put it on TV, gotten it in front of everybody, had a massive industry around it. That's the difference. So my point of saying this is that legal status matters, because the normalization of a drug for its own harm matters. The harms of drugs are not just the individual harm to your body in a laboratory, what it does to somebody. It's the societal acceptance around it, right? Alcohol in that way is much more deadly than methamphetamine. Methamphetamine was used by 0.01% of the US population last year. It killed 1,000 people. It's deadly. You don't want anybody to be using methamphetamine. Your teeth are going to fall out. You're going to have cardiac arrest. It's very deadly. But when you look at, if you just compare it to a drug like alcohol, much worse. Not because a drink is more harmful than a hit of methamphetamine in a pipe, but because, again, to society, so many more people use it, that harm gets exponentially higher. And my worry with marijuana is we're taking a plant that's been around for thousands of years, we're manipulating it, we're increasing the THC, we're putting it in gummy bears, in chocolate bars, in vapes that are, I'm going to show you some products that are 99% pure. That's crazy. And that's what a lot of people are using in the Juul pods. And you don't even know what's in that stuff, by the way. They're taking these cartridges of THC that they've independently tested them, tons of contaminants and other things in them. We're worried about lead paint. We should be worried about lead paint, but you cannot be worried about lead paint and not worried about 99% THC. Especially, by the way, lead paint lowers your IQ by 6 points, and marijuana, if you use it regularly for 3 years, lowers it by 8. Both bad. We don't want either one. But we're hypocritical to ignore one because we did it 30 years ago and it's not a big deal, or we want social justice because we think people are in prison for smoking a joint. You want social justice? Great. Change criminal justice laws, policing practices or whatnot, but don't pretend you're solving that issue with marijuana, because you're not. I like to look at some of these old ads from cigarettes to remind us what we thought was normal. At one point, this is amazing, I love this one, Dr. Batty's asthma cigarettes. Cigarettes for your asthma. But I always like to point out on the bottom you probably can't see it, but on the bottom of the ad, they had somewhat of a conscience because they said not recommended for children under 6. So if you're over 6, your great-great-grandparents thought that this was okay, and they used to see ads like this. So we don't have a good history, folks, when it comes to substances. We have a unique liking for them in America, way more than in other countries, for multiple reasons. Wealth is one of the reasons, culture, there's so many reasons. But we do not have the idea that we're going to finally get it right with one substance, and we've never gotten it right in our history, is foolish. As I said, today's marijuana is harmful, often 30 times stronger. We've already had legalization in several states, and I'm going to talk about some of those impacts, and those costs are mounting. We're not going to know about the full extent of those costs for 20 years, so I'm not here to say that we already know all the answers, but when you look at what happened, you saw the report today, Quest Diagnostics, the largest drug testing company in the country, finding a 10% increase in workplace marijuana tests and a higher rate in legal states. That matters, folks, because that's not just like, the guy at at Domino's Pizza who forgets to put pepperoni on and it's like, okay, whatever, I missed the doping. That's not those jobs, because, whatever, that person, okay, fine, I don't have pepperoni, it's probably better for me. We're talking about their bus driver. We're talking about your doctor. We're talking about the guys at the nuclear plant 30 miles away. We're talking about the limo driver who killed 19 other people upstate New York last year. NTSB just released a crash report, significant amounts of THC in the system. But how many of you have heard about even that at all in the media yet? No. Because we're either immune to it or we're just not hearing it, whatever the reason is. We're not even hearing about it. And we can go on and on. The Long Island crash, the Amtrak train that was carrying the lawmakers last year that collided into the trash truck. Just look at all of them. You'd be shocked to see what the common denominator is. I'm not saying it was the only cause, but if you know anyone that uses a lot of marijuana, they're not the sharpest tool in the shed. I don't want them behind a wheel when the lights change quickly, when a car comes out in front of them and you need quick reflexes. It's not something we want to be promoting, but that's what's happening, especially in these legal states. There are medicinal components of the marijuana plant. Fine. That's good. We need to develop them medicinally, but don't give someone a joint and put a green sticker on it with a cross and say that's medicine. Those are two different things. If you have questions about the medicine part, I'm happy to talk about it in the Q&A. We are violating every single international agreement on drugs, and you may think, what do I care about international agreements? I care about, my local taxes, my schools, I get it. But the issue is, when we go to the UN and violate these treaties, authoritarian countries come back to us and say, oh, you violated that treaty? Well, you know that human trafficking thing that we signed with you? We're going to violate that. You know that environmental pact we signed with you? You're violating that. That's how international relations works. And they're looking at the US and saying, wait a minute, you have a federal law that says it's illegal. You have states legalizing and you're doing nothing about it. And you're saying with a straight face that you have uniform laws and that you uphold the rule of law. It makes absolutely no sense. So I think that does matter. As I said, the leading public health authorities in our country oppose legalization. That matters to me. When you have the heads of every major medical association on one side and, Cheech and Chong and Whoopi Goldberg on the other side, that tells me something about which side I want to be on if it's a scientific issue. If it's learning comedy, I want to be on Whoopi Goldberg's side. I get it. But she's now in the pop business, so she's on the side of Cheech and Chong. And if it's about marijuana, I think I want to be on the side of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of everything else, basically, that has come out on this issue. And surprise, surprise, the drug dealers have not, packed up and gone to dental school after Colorado legalized marijuana. They got bigger and badder than ever. Why? Because you need someone to sell to people under 21. You need someone who will sell at all hours and doesn't care about licenses and will not pay the tax. And the dealers are happy to undercut the legal price. They can beat the government at their own game. They're doing it. And the international cartels also say, ooh, a way in. Okay, we're going to pretend that we're selling marijuana legally and all that and have that business, but we're really going to be doing other businesses at once. And we have that. The Mexican and the Asian cartels have come into all of these states. Go to Pueblo, Colorado. Just go walk around. Talk to people about what they say, what's happened to their community. Yeah, Denver, it's kind of like New York City. Like, yeah, if we do it Manhattan, it'll be a nightmare, and that's fine. We don't go there anyway, right? But your own town, which is the equivalent of maybe a Pueblo, Colorado, or similar to those suburbs, see how it's changed an entire community. See how it's changed the rural farming landscape. Whether it's the smell, the look, the kind of community you want to attract. These are all very, very important questions that we need to really think about before making what would by far be the most consequential decision in drug policy that New York has made in really ever, I think. Much more important than alcohol prohibition repeal, because alcohol had been legalized. It was only prohibited for 15 years, and it was never enforced in New York. That wasn't actually a big change in our history. This would be a very big deal, what we're talking about right now. We happen to be alive in this era, which is really interesting to talk about it, which is pretty, it's a blessing to be able to do that, because it's a monumental decision that will affect these kids and their kids and their kids. And we have to really think long and hard about it. I'm going to fast forward through a couple of things because I want to show you some of the ads that we have in legal states, because, delivering more joy than dogs and babies combined, that's a marijuana delivery company that has the billboards everywhere. LA is full of brilliant people. By the way, I used to live in LA. I don't know about full of brilliant people, but okay, they have a few. But anyway, fine. We deliver them pot. This is, and then when we say, well, wait a minute, you said you weren't going to advertise, because every state wants to say they're going to be great at it, and they said, oh no, but we're a delivery company. We're not the product. But where do you get the product from? Oh, we can't tell you. Okay, so you can't. Are you getting it from legal sources? Not allowed to say. This is what goes. And you think that the state government is going to be able to keep up with these guys? They're 10 steps ahead of any state bureaucrat working 10 to 5 on the issue of marijuana in California. I promise you that. They're not going to keep up with this. And they are violating their own state laws. Forget about federal law. International law is way, forget about that for a minute. They're violating their own state laws. And nobody's batting an eye because of the industry, the political influence. And the politicians are like, we have other fish to fry, Kevin. We're not going to go after these guys. That's what's happening right now all across the country. Youth targeting. Joe Camel, I think, is making a reincarnation. He's being reincarnated. He's coming back. When I tell, by the way, a group of 16-year-olds in high school that their parents' generation thought it was a good idea to have a camel sell a deadly substance, they can't even believe that was a real thing. And that was not that long ago, because we all remember Joe Camel in here. Again, I don't want to date anybody, but we remember. And also when they figure out that our generation thought it was a good idea to smoke for 35,000 feet in the air in a metal bird with no oxygen to begin with, then they start really thinking about what was going on. But we made those decisions for decades. And the secondhand smoke issue, which may not be as big an issue here, but again, I live in the city. Boy, if my neighbor's cooking curry, I can tell you whether it's green, yellow, red. I can give you the region. We're all living on top of each other. We know everything that anybody is doing. So let alone if the marijuana's coming in through the vents with the newborns, and we got to think about that. Well, where do you position the crib? Because of the nose is going to get the vent. These are real considerations. The third-hand smoke, which people say, what's third-hand smoke? Well, go to any, apartment building from 1900 and you will be exposed to third-hand smoke because of all of the cigarette smoke that's in the walls that you really have a hard time getting rid of unless you knock them down. All of these things, and affecting the pregnant women and the babies and the neonatal. Go to the neonatal of Denver Health and ask them the substance that they're testing positive most for. It's not opioids. And the effect of today's THC, if you think it's bad for a 30-year-old, what does that mean for, a fetus, basically, in the womb? This is the kind of stuff that we need to think about and, frankly, hold our political leaders account for. Because they all think they're doing the cool thing. We're doing the thing that everybody's doing. It's the cool thing to attract any of our new voters under 25. They're going to love us. Maybe they will love you for now, and it's cool for now, but it's a catastrophic decision that's going to have implications far, far beyond today. We've had a massive increase in the number of marijuana users in our country in the last 15 years. As the opioid crisis has worsened, the marijuana crisis goes along with it. Don't let anyone tell you that people are substituting opioids and they're using marijuana instead, because all the studies now are saying that's not happening. But the scariest thing to me is not that we have 25 million people stoned, it's that half of them are using it every single day. That's a big deal. 40 to 45 to 50% are using it almost every day. That to me is a very, very big deal, because those are the bus drivers, the doctors, all your kids' friends, your kids, you. I mean, it's a big deal. And we got to think about what that means for society. We've had increases. I'm going to go because I really do want to take questions. Increases in use in most of the legal states. I do want to spend a minute on the vaporizing industry, just to let you know, long story short, they are in bed with the marijuana industry, as shocking as that is to you, I'm sure. Juul started out as a marijuana company. That's how enmeshed they are. And it was a bunch of geniuses from Stanford that came up with Juul because they thought it would mean less people smoking. And those industries are together, and that really worries me, because with this stuff, you can hide it from everybody. You used to be able to smell it in the boys' bathroom, not anymore. You hide it. It looks like a cartridge, like a flash drive, a pen. I mean, teachers have enough to deal with now. They're dealing with that. And by the way, talk to your fellow teachers in legal states. They're not exactly rolling in extra money that they have. They're not overpaid just because of pot. They are actually overworked because now they're dealing with that on top of everything else, which don't forget about how the effect is on test scores and memory as well, and school performance. All of these issues are really, really important. The social marketing, which I'm going to make sure you all have a copy of this after if you'd like it. I'm happy for you to have it. You can look through it. The social marketing going on with the vaporizing industry, it's big tobacco ads all over again, except this time we have Instagram. We didn't have Instagram in 1965. We had Reader's Digest and Women's World, which were in the doctor's offices. Now we have Instagram and Twitter. And the top 10 social media characters, or they are characters, but the accounts, 8 of the top 10 are paid by the marijuana industry. The YouTube stars, many of them paid by the marijuana industry to place videos that look authentic. They don't look corporate. They're not slick. It's a new era of advertising. And the idea that we're going to be able to compete with that in a legal atmosphere where the lid is blown off and there's zero stigma around it. This is the amazing thing when people say legalization will solve all these problems. If that's the case, we should legalize all drugs tomorrow. If we can get rid of the cocaine cartels by legalizing drugs, please just legalize cocaine. If you think fewer kids will use heroin and cocaine if you legalize it, which is their argument for marijuana, you should legalize those drugs. Surprise, surprise. No, most of those leaders haven't signed up for that one yet because it's not the cool thing right now. But by the way, the industry is waiting for it to be the cool thing, and they will be very happy to fill those shoes. Because if you think they're making money off pot, just wait till you see the price benefit per pound on cocaine and opium, heroin, etc. They're waiting. They want to do it. But the issue is, you have to be consistent with these arguments. You should then want to legalize. And don't say to me, well, but what about alcohol? Because you're not inconsistent there. Yes, you are. It's a different culture. Alcohol is used by 70% of Americans. The train has left the station. We're paying the price. But if your headlights are broken in your car, you don't bust your taillights to be consistent. Our headlights are broken with alcohol. We have to admit that. We should try and fix it if we can. It's very hard. We don't have the right tools. We keep getting, it's like very difficult to do. But we should try. But we don't bust your taillights. And the idea when they say, well, Kevin, can't we give kids an alternative because maybe they can use marijuana and it's safer than alcohol because it makes them more mellow or something. The arguments are amazing. To me, that's like saying to a kid, why don't you jump out of the 8th floor window instead of the 7th floor window? It's the 7th floor window instead of the 8th floor window, right? The 7th floor window is safer. Just jump out of that one. These are the dumbest things. But these are being said in the annals of, I hate to say it, your elected leaders all across the country and in every single state legislature. We have to get smarter. This is all the stuff about and then the alcohol industry, don't worry, they're getting involved in marijuana. Their weed-infused wine, their THC-infused beer. The latest one was a marijuana-infused beer that doesn't have alcohol. Kind of like, what's the point? But okay, sure. But the wine, the hard liquor, all of these things, they're all trying to infuse it all together. And folks, they have to, because these are drugs that are used together. This idea that kids who use one drug don't use the other, they're much more likely to use the other drug if they use one drug. It's polysubstance abuse we're talking about. It's not one or the other. It kind of reminds me of the logic that some very well-meaning parents have when they say, we're going to host the alcohol parties at our house because then Junior won't drink. When he leaves the house, he'll only drink with us. And yes, I'm sure your son, your 16-year-old son, when he gets offered a beer at a party that isn't at your house, looks at his best friend and says, man, I can't have that drink. I only drink with my dad. But this is we apply that, and some of us think, well, if it's regulated and we do it the right way, kids will get the right message. No, they won't. They already, frankly, in New York City, in Manhattan, if you've been lately, there's a noticeable increase in smell of marijuana because young people think it's already legalized. And then you ask, why do you think it's legal? Well, they're talking about it on the radio and TV all the time. They think it's legalized. There actually was a study out of Canada very recently. Canada federally, because of the change in government there, against the wishes of the medical authority and against really the wishes of every provincial government, legalized marijuana in a certain form. On the federal level in October, they've now done studies saying that the increase in marijuana use in Canada happened right before the law. It happened during the discussion of this issue because most young people thought it's going to happen anyway, and they kind of thought it already happened. And so, of course, what we say has implications for young people, and the introduction of the alcohol market, which lies through its teeth in everything that it does. My favorite thing is during the Super Bowl when you see the beer ads, which are very good ads, but you see the ads and it says, enjoy responsibly on the bottom. If everybody enjoyed alcohol responsibly, we would have no alcohol industry. You all realize that? The alcohol industry relies on 10% of us who are alcoholics. That's where they get their money. 10% of us consume 75% of the total alcohol in this country. So these are businesses that rely on heavy users. I'm sorry, they just do. And so don't let anyone think that legalization is about you. I'm aging you again, but it's not really about you if you're over 30. It's just not. Because if you use it once in a while, it's like if you have a glass of wine with dinner. You're not an important person to the industry. Well, maybe to that winery or something, but to the overall, that you're a blip. You're not even a blip. I hate to say it, you're not even a blip to the alcohol, but you're not. And so if you think, well, we just want to smoke a little bit and not be criminals and just use it once in a while and we're 60 and our kids moved out and what's the big deal? You could do that now. I don't care. Have a blast and fall asleep and I don't really care what you order. A lot of bad munchies and stuff, processed foods, because you're going to get hungry if you smoke a lot of weed. Go for it. But it's not about you if you're 60 years old and the kids have moved out. I hate to say it. It's about those kids again. I hate to keep referring to them, but it is. That's the message in what we're doing. It's about hooking the young. Why did we have candy cigarettes? Remember those? Gum. Did we have them because the Marlboro man was going to chew gum with them, or your tough grandpa who smoked all the time did he ever use them? No. We had them so that kids could mimic the behavior. It was legal. It's a great loophole. Make it look exactly like the real thing, but it's just not the actual real thing. I used it as a kid. We all loved it. It was fun. It made us feel old. You want to do nothing more when you're young than to do what adults do. That's why alcohol is so seductive. It's a badge of adulthood. It means you're an adult now. It's that rite of passage. Why would we create more of those badges when we're already dealing with all the problems with the current ones? It just doesn't, again, the only reason we would do it is to make an industry and a very small number of people in that industry very rich. If we want to do that, then we should do that, because we will. But if we don't, if we care about our communities and our kids, we have to rethink again. This is the picture of the butane hash oil, the dabs that are the 99% THC. Someone yelled at me the other day, they said, "Kevin, why did you put heroin on the screen and you're talking about marijuana? You're reefer madness." And I said, well, that's not heroin. This looks like it. That's not it. That's THC. That is not Woodstock weed. That's not a joint. That's stuff we don't even know what it does to you right now because the research, it's so new. And when people say, well, isn't it better to have a regulated market so you know what's in it? Well, your regulated market created this. The drug dealers didn't create this, as bad as they are. They didn't create this. Pablo Escobar did not create the pot gummy bear. He created a lot of bad things. He's a very bad guy. Killed a lot of people, needs to go to prison forever. But he didn't come up with pot lollipops. That was good old American innovation above board in Colorado the minute it legalized. That's the stuff that I very, very much worry about, because it's not like you get that and then you get rid of the Pablo Escobars and drug dealers of the world, which is often what the politicians will say, we need to get rid of the black market, so let's legalize. No, that's not what happens. You get both. And we really want to think about if we want both. We already have one. And it matters because your brain is in constant development up until about age 30. This is really cool, and it's really interesting. And THC, remember that, the active ingredient that gets you high? That affects certain regions of the brain that matter when it comes to learning. By the way, tobacco doesn't affect that, which is very interesting. Tobacco affects a lot of other things. You get lung cancer, you die, it's bad. But it doesn't affect the memory. It doesn't affect mood and behavior. Although the only way it does is through addiction, of course. But in terms of what we're seeing with marijuana, with the psychosis and mental illness that I'm going to talk about in a minute, driving impairment, it doesn't impair you. But THC does. Marijuana does impair you. Because it affects these very certain regions of the brain that are very, very important. Right now, the scientific community, and these are just some of these scientific articles that you aren't going to read from where you are, but I just put them up here. The scientific community is using the dreaded word that usually would get you kicked out of a scientific meeting because you would be an extremist that jumped to conclusions. The dreaded word is the C word, causal. That's like, you can't say that in a scientific meeting. You'll be just laughed at, okay? Causal, no. Correlated, yes. Causal? Nothing's causal. Well, now they're using the C word for marijuana and mental illness, specifically psychosis. What is psychosis? Well, it can be acute, it can be not acute, but it's basically a really bad panic attack that, maybe you'll recover from, but not everybody does, because it can advance to schizophrenia, which is the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst on mental illness. Depression, which we have record levels of in this country, and if you're under 25, the levels of depression and anxiety now are off the charts. That's why our suicide epidemic, which we often forget about because we say opioid epidemic, the suicide epidemic is so important to talk about. All of these things are now connected with high-grade marijuana. And when I say high-grade, I don't mean like stuff that's hard to find. I mean the stuff that's becoming the norm now, especially in legal states. Do you know that in not one legal state is there a limit on potency? So you could at least say, well, maybe we'll do it different in New York. We'll put a 20% limit, 10%, 5%. That's not even on the table here. The industry wouldn't make money, so they're not going for it. The minute you try and get reasonable with something unreasonable, you have a problem. And that's what we're seeing, these problems of mental illness and all these other issues. And there's a really good book that I always talk about, I don't make any money from it, so it's not a financial thing for me, by a New Yorker, actually, living in Goshen, named Tell Your Children, the link between mental illness, marijuana, mental illness, and violence. And he talks about how today's marijuana isn't your marijuana that's making you chill and relaxed. It's actually causing violent outbursts that are having massive implications for child abuse and child endangerment, big implications for crime, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, mental, on and on and on. It's a really interesting book. You might have seen him talk about it. So I'm worried about that. I'm also worried about the fact that there are contaminants. Don't think that because it's legal, you know what's in it. The reality is there are hundreds of thousands of recalls in Colorado every year because of the stuff that they put in this. Marijuana is a very thirsty plant. It gets a lot of water. It needs a lot of water. It grows mold very easily. By the way, if you're an environmentalist, marijuana is should not be your drug of choice because of the water and energy consumed, the blocks of houses that these grow houses consume with the energy, with the indoor grows. That's another reason why farmers have a big problem with it, the ones that don't use it, because they are sucking up the resources around them. It's a very difficult, finicky plant in that way. We have had a history in our country of substituting one drug for the other. We used to have coca wine. That was the answer to the opium epidemic of the late 1800s. Cocaine-infused wine. Then that didn't work, and they said morphine was the answer to the cocaine issue. Then that didn't work, and they said alcohol was the answer to the opium issue. And now they're saying, the marijuana industry is saying, that marijuana is the answer to opiates because there's fewer deaths, etc. And without going into all the details, that's just false. In fact, a study came out yesterday. Hunt studied 1,000 people and found that none of them, it wasn't a substitution. They use it together. And you might think, well, maybe people who use pills will use marijuana instead. In the long term, they don't. They're very different. Marijuana is just not as good for the pain at all. If you use marijuana or CBD cream and think you get relief, all the more power to you, but that's something that we call the placebo effect. Again, if it helps you, fine. But I don't know if you know this, CBD and THC, they don't even penetrate through the skin. So you have cream with, you don't know what's in it and you're feeling better, okay. But it's not going through your skin. There's so many falsehoods out there and misinformation about this issue that I don't think people get. I'm going to fast forward through a lot of this about opiates. I want to get to the end here and take questions. Surprise, surprise, a recent survey found that 1 in 4 high school seniors, if it were legalized, they would use it. These are ones that didn't use before. That's 25% of high school seniors said they would use it if it was legal. Our elected officials need to hear this. The increase in the workforce positivity, I already talked about. The increase in offenses in Colorado. Crime has increased in Colorado. I don't know if it's because of marijuana or not. I don't know. But I can tell you, they promised that crime would go down. That hasn't happened. It went up. Now, I don't know if it's because of pot. Maybe some of it is. I don't know. I'm not making that. But it hasn't gone down. Why would it go down? It's just the logic is incredible. But 53% of the Coloradans voted for it, because they thought it was going to solve all these problems. They were promised all of these things. By the way, I think 53% voted for it because they thought it was what we call decriminalization, not legalization. Those are two different things. Decriminalization means you're not a criminal if you use it. Legalization means what they're actually doing, which is selling it and marketing it. I don't think they knew about the marketing side. And I don't think New Yorkers, as smart as we all are, understand the proposals in Albany right now. The proposals are it's Colorado on steroids, is the proposal, basically. And I think that we just think it's about getting poor kids out of prison. I promise you it's not. In fact, it's not only do I promise you, we have told lawmakers, we'll support getting them out of prison. Just do that then. If that's what you want to do, do it. Why do you have to legalize pot to do it? And they have no answer. Because it's about making money. You don't make money if you release people from prison. But you make money if you sell something. So they want it to be so you sell something, and that's the difference. The revenue has been pennies, as I said earlier. In every state that's legalized, it's less than 0.2% of the state budget. The Cuomo budget said that we wanted to legalize it. He said we'll legalize it, and in 3 years we might get $300 million. Do you know how much that is in the New York State budget, what that represents? 0.17% of the budget. Sounds like a lot of money, but what about the costs? Because then you have to hire all the officers for the DUI traffic enforcement. By the way, we have no breathalyzer, we have no level. This is not alcohol, very, very different in your system. You have to hire all these new officers to deal with the DUIs. You have to hire more people at school to deal with the offenses. You have to hire bureaucrats and regulators to deal with the new market. By the time you do that, that $300 million has gone away. And it was already pennies to begin with. I'm going to go forward here. I think I talked about the concentrates. I talked about the black market, foreign cartels, marijuana disappearing from state grow houses. I mean, again, the pot industry is way ahead of the state bureaucrats on this. There's a tracking system. They're not selling it to kids. They've done undercover stings. They're selling it to kids all the time. The legal stores where you're supposed to ask for ID, just like the liquor stores do, they're selling it to kids. Edibles. The issue is, when you have gummy bears sitting on the table, do you know what's in them? You would assume they're just gummy bears. That's what I would assume. But when they're laced with THC, they're sending teens and little kids, and I gotta say, your dog and cats, actually, that's a huge one, is the pets. They're sending them, and more people are moved by stories about pets than their kids. I don't know what that says about us, but no, they do the brain testing, not just the pollsters. They do like what makes your heart flutter and what you care about more. When a dog eats a pot edible and you know it's a pot edible and you see them eat it, you're much more stressed than when you see a 3-year-old girl eating it. Again, I don't know what that says about society, but that's what the testing shows. But the point is, it doesn't matter, it's not about one or the other. The fact that this is happening and record numbers is a big concern. So there's ER admissions to the hospital. Oh, that's another payment. Because people are going to the hospital being poisoned with THC. 5-year-old is getting their hands on gummy bears not knowing what it is. They're having like 20 times the legal limit. Do you know what the serving size of marijuana, what the legal serving size is? It's basically one gummy bear. In some places, it's one arm of the gummy bear. Can you remember the last time you had one arm of a gummy bear and stopped eating it? For the chocolate bars, they said it was 1/10 of a chocolate bar. I don't know about you when it comes to chocolate, but I'm not eating 1/10. If it's in front of me, I'm eating the whole thing. If I'm really full, I'll have half. 1/10? So when they have these tragedies, we say, well, are you going to change your size of the bar? And can you do? No, you should know better. Parents need to do their job. That's the answer. That's their answer to all this, by the way. And I think that's one of the most offensive things to say, because I know plenty of very good parents who have suffered the tragedy of addiction. Some are in this room. And the idea that the industry says, well, it's not our responsibility, Kevin, the parents should just teach the thing. Well, okay, but if you're advertising it in their face, the other day there was, and I think I have a picture of it here, I hope I do. I don't think I do. There was, and I'm going to get to social justice in a minute, there were free samples of pot edibles out in front of an outdoor sporting goods store in Denver over the weekend. My chief of staff lives in Denver. He took a picture. He reported it. I don't think they ever got. His 2-year-old daughter almost had a sample of it. It was a square of a THC chocolate bar. And they only knew that it was because they asked. I said, well, what is this? And then they told them. With glee, they told them. The free samples. How is that allowed? But it is. And I'm going to end on the issue of social justice, kind of where I started. You might be shocked by this, but I'm not. There are more kids arrested today in Colorado for pot, and more black kids arrested, actually, for pot now than there was before legalization. You might be thinking, why? It's legal. Not if you're under 21, it's not. Not in public housing, it's not. Not in your car, it's not. It's not legal at school. So all of those offenses are increasing. So they said they're doing it for social justice, but there's actually more minority kids in the system now, not fewer. Again, it's like you can't make this stuff up. It's incredible, the statistics. They're arresting more people now than ever for public use. The law enforcement is totally overwhelmed. I talked to any law enforcement officer in these legal states. None of them think this has been a good idea. unless they've retired and they now work for the pot industry, and there are a few of those, unfortunately. But the ones in uniform and the vast majority that are honorable that would never work for the industry, which most of them won't, tell you that this has been a disaster, not neutral, it's been a disaster for them. Because everyone thinks it's legal and they're using it everywhere and it's in car, and they pull somebody over and they smell marijuana and the guy says, well, you have no evidence that I used it and you can't search, it's legal. And by the way, I have the legal amount here, which is like the legal possession amount of personal possession is like 500 joints. Because you can fit 500 joints in your pocket, that's personal possession. And so they have 500 joints, they're transporting it, maybe they're bringing it even out of the state, or they're bringing it to a young person, and the cop can do nothing. It's like, okay, and they're on their way. And the car crashes have doubled in Washington and Colorado since legalization. How do I know that they're marijuana related? Because the coroner tests. And the coroner and the police that did when you look at the overall circumstance of the crash, you look at the concentration, there's no way that the impairment wouldn't have contributed to it. Those cases have doubled. So these are very, very big problems. Now, I've probably depressed you all because it's very depressing, everything I'm saying, but I want to not depress you now, and we want to do something about it and be helpful. We are mounting a significant pushback education advocacy effort. Kelly is here tonight and is a big, big part of our team. She's our field organizer, and we're thanking her for coming tonight. She has sign-up sheets. Where are they? Okay. Table on the left, sign-up sheets. And sign-up could be you want to get emails from us and learn about the issue, or what I really hope you'll do, which is come to the state capitol or speak to your county or speak to other folks and help us advocate, because our voices have to be heard. Folks, too many people are being paid for their voices to be heard because they're in the pot industry and they need this to pass so that they can make money. That's why they're advocating. We need people in the community who simply care about the community, care about your kids, to stand up and, talk to your assembly person, talk to your senator. They need to hear from you because they're hearing from the pot industry every day because they're, paid to call them. We can't pay you to call them, but we can help you with the facts, we can coach you, we can give you letters. Even if you just want to learn about it and not do anything on that, please sign up and be part of what we're doing. We're working with a lobbying firm. We have a whole operation. We have a field where we're doing mini protests. We're doing press conferences. We're working with multiple groups. And just to give you a little policy update, because you might be thinking, where are we with it in New York? Well, what happened was the governor, unfortunately, who was totally against it a year ago, I don't know, something happened. I don't know what happened. Someone spiked his something because he changed his mind very quickly, which is too bad. And basically, he said it should happen and he put it in his budget. Everybody said, Kevin, you're never going to be able, you and Sam and, we have Dr. Kamer in here who's done an incredible job. They said, you're not going to be able to stop it. We have a very strong governor, he's very powerful, and you just give up. And we said no. And we actually got it removed from the budget, which is the only thing removed from the budget that he wanted. He got everything else, but we got it removed from the budget. And I said, how did you do that? Well, we worked with a lot of different people. The PTA, I don't know if anybody's a member of the PTA here. If you are, please write your state PTA and thank them because they stood up. By the way, in many states, they do not stand up. I hate to say it. They did here. The Medical Society of New York, if your doctor's not a member, get your doctor to be a member and thank them. They stood up, and law enforcement stood up. We had a grand coalition. Minority community stood up. They said, we were in Canarsie with Assemblywoman Williams. She said, my community is suffering from drug abuse. The last thing we need is another drug house. We're trying to get rid of the drug houses, not bring them in. We want to increase our real estate value. Because what happens when you have pot shops is your real estate value. Because, it might be shocking to you, but the first thing you tell your realtor when you're looking for a house isn't, I want to be near a pot shop. It doesn't exactly help the prices. It doesn't help your small businesses that are there. People don't want to shop in a mall with marijuana. Even the people who voted for it don't want to do that and smell it everywhere. So we got the coalition. We were successful. That was round one, which everyone thought we'd be knocked out and dead by now, but we're not. We're bruised, we're battered, we're everything up, but we're still standing. And we won round one. But it's not over, because round 2, until June 30th, is the standalone bills that now they couldn't do it through the budget, so standalone bills they're going to try and push. And we have to push back against that. We're doing it, but again, we need everybody's help in any way that you can. We're going to try and do a billboard campaign. We're going to try and do targeted Facebook ads. We're going to try and do, and you might be thinking, well, where do you get your money from, Kevin? Because you're talking about the money from the industry. And I'll tell you, we're a small nonprofit. We get the vast majority of our donations from individuals who listen to things, care about it, donate, when we give talks or whatnot. Unfortunately, our biggest donors have suffered the worst consequences of addiction. They are now, parents who used to be parents and aren't anymore, unfortunately, which we have many of them. Why? Because they were either caught up, unfortunately, in the heroin epidemic, where marijuana was the starting drug. Because I'm sorry, nobody who dies of a heroin overdose only used heroin in their life. It's not how it works. So they see marijuana as a critical part of that unfortunate slide. I have other parents whose kids died in car crashes. One was on his way to prom, and they were dabbing in the car, 17 years old, dead. So unfortunately, we have these tragedies that we're trying to now prevent. And many of you have lived these tragedies more than anybody else has. You know who you are. And so we are trying to work with organizations like Drug Crisis in Our Backyard. It's done an incredible job. Thank you. And multiple other organizations is how we've done it. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to spread the message with the ads and with the other things, with the letter writing campaign. That's why if you get involved to write letters, it would be helpful. Here's some of it got cut off, but we have some of the press conferences that we've done in all over the state, Long Island, Westchester County, all over. We have a website. You can check it out. We talk about social justice. We talk about marijuana and mental health. As we said, it's not inevitable. We've been passing out flyers on that. I already showed that. I talked about the budget. We have a careful plan and strategy. Our New York website is sam-ny.org, which I should make a lot bigger for people to see, but sam-ny, because it's Sam, New York. And these are the ways that you can help us. We are targeting a bunch of senators right now, and we can, both upstate around here and Long Island, all around, which we can talk about as well if you'd like to. And as I said, we have a whole team. There's Kelly, who's here tonight, which we're very excited about. I'm going to skip that quote. I wrote a book, which the PR people always say, Kevin, if you want people to know about your book, you should say it in the beginning, not the end, and kind of as a forgetful thing. But anyway, it's not a big deal. But if you're interested in it, it's called Reefer Sanity: 7 Great Myths About Marijuana. And I go through each of the myths, many of which I've talked about tonight. And you can also go to our main website, which is even bigger than our New York one, which is simply learnaboutsam.org. We have PowerPoints, videos, talking points. We have these one-pagers in color format. We have reports. We have research. We have testimonials. We have scientists talking. We have YouTube videos of Patrick Kennedy talking about this. We have we have everything on there. All the stats, all the one-liners, all the talking points, all the videos. So we have pictures of these products if you want to see what they actually look like, multiple things. So that's really what we're about. I hope maybe you learned something tonight. I hope you might be interested in joining us, and we definitely have time for questions. So I want to open up the floor for questions, and then I'll repeat the question. So I guess we'll go this way. Yes, sir.
What's happening in our neighboring states?
Great question. So a lot of people say, well, shouldn't New York has to legalize it because everyone else around has already? The answer is they haven't. We stopped it in New Jersey also. We are stopping it as we speak in Connecticut. They have not done it. Rhode Island has not done it. Massachusetts voted for it, but they've barely implemented it, and they've had a lot of problems. Maine voted for it, and they still haven't implemented it. So what's happening around the states is that no other state has done this. So New York does not have to do it because everyone else is doing it, which is the argument that was made. Well, New Jersey's doing it, so we should do it. It's a bad argument anyway, but even if you subscribe to that argument, good, don't do it because they didn't do it yet, and they're not going to. Every state that's legalized, this is really important, every state that's legalized has done it one way and one way only: ballot initiative. And they've won on the ballot because they've put tens of millions of dollars in TV ads and misinformation campaigns by the industry. And us opponents, us rich social workers and, teachers and parents that have all billions lying around, we haven't been able to match their money on a statewide level. That's why, and when we have, we've defeated them on the statewide level. We defeated the Arizona ballot initiative. We raised as much money as they did through businesses, and we beat them. But in the other states like California, we were outspent 30 million to 1, meaning $30 million. We barely scrapped together 1 million. And in a state like California, you can't get a TV commercial for 3 seconds for your, neighbor's area to watch, let alone any other houses. I mean, you can't do anything with that in California. So that one we lost. But we've won in every state legislature in the country. No state legislature has legalized marijuana. Let me be clear. No state legislature has legalized marijuana. New York should not be the first. There are way too many lessons. Yes?
Kevin, what was the rationale of the Canadian federal government to legalize it for the whole country?
Well, the rationale there, I can give you the kind of answer in the book. I can give you the real answer. I'll give you the real answer. This was not a priority for the government. So they were having elections. And in Canada, it's a parliamentary system, of course. So you vote for the party, and then that party selects its leader. And the Conservative had been in power for 10 years. Stephen Harper, they wanted to get rid of them. No one lasts more than 5 years there, so 10 years was a long time. And Justin Trudeau, the son of the most celebrated prime minister, was running the young, fresh Kennedy of Canada, now mired in scandal, unfortunately, and has in the lowest ratings of any recent prime minister, which is amazing fall from grace. But anyway, back then, he was the Kennedy of Canada. And he didn't care about this issue. And then he was at an event where someone said, why don't you legalize, what do you think about marijuana and legalization? And he basically gave an answer off the cuff that was like, I don't know, if we regulated it above board and we taxed it, maybe that would be good and we can send a message to kids. And he kind of gave this jumbled answer. The industry seized on that jumbled answer, got to the politicos and said, you're right, that's what you should do. And they laid out the policy. And basically overnight, this became party policy. And I'll tell you, I talked to a lot of people in Justin Trudeau's political party in Canada. My wife is Canadian. And I got to be careful because there's a TV camera on here, so it's going to be played in public, but it's okay. I talked to a lot of people in that party before, and they were not thrilled. They were like, what? No, wait, we're running on like jobs and the environment, and this is a distraction. What are we doing? And so they weren't happy about it. They also just didn't believe in it at all. It wasn't just bad politics. They didn't like it. Anyway, obviously Trudeau won by a landslide, the party. And that then became, because in Canada, they tend to keep their campaign promises. I don't know, we do different things, but they do that there. They're very decent people. And so they kept their campaign promise and implemented it. The law enforcement and the provinces were like, whoa, we are not ready for this. It was delayed, and then they did it in late October. It is still, especially in certain places, wildly unpopular. There's a humongous underground market that has grown in Canada as a result, and the Philip Morris and the alcohol industry, they're all headquartered, their marijuana in Canada now. So then now they're ready to come south. And that's my worry about what's going on in Canada. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a repeal in 5 years, in 3 years with a new government. I don't know. And we're a nonpartisan organization. We don't support or oppose candidates, especially foreign elections. But we'll have to see what happens there. But I will tell you again, this issue on a local level, whether you're in Canada or in the United States, it is not popular on the local level. People might vote on it on a macro level, but in their local town and city, they don't want pot shops everywhere. And I think there's a local resistance, even in Canada, that we're seeing, even in liberal cities that consider themselves progressive and people can use weed and whatever. They don't want their kids around it. They have been bombarded by it, and they're even having a second look. So, yeah, I think it's to be continued in Canada. I don't think it's done. Yeah. Yes, I'll go this way.
You said that it's round 2, and you have it
Yeah.
until June 30th. Can you kind of
Yeah.
walk us through the steps? So what happens then, and then what happens after that?
So obviously we're in a school and public money, so I'm not here to tell you to lobby or you should lobby or whatnot, but I know the lobbying rules very well, and when you're asked it, and I didn't plant the question, when you're asked it in the audience, you can answer. And so basically it's just, the legislative process, the legislature meets until the end of June. So they are now, now they're in recess, so they're gonna come back in 2 weeks, and 19 days, I think. It's a nice spring break. I wish spring break 19 days is a good deal. Anyhow, and so they're in there for 19 days, and then they come back and start introducing the different bills. And they're going to be dealing with, I think someone told me thousands of bills in 2 months, at least hundreds, I mean, a lot. So they're going to try and sneak this through. Obviously, they can't because it's very divisive. Remember, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. The Democrats are totally split on this. Let's be very clear. In fact, in New Jersey, it was stopped because of the Democratic Legislative African American Caucus that did not want this to pass. So I don't think this is a partisan issue. It shouldn't be, and it really isn't. So that's going to be introduced. And then we're going to have to do a very good job at educating lawmakers basically between now and now that your lawmaker is at spring break. That means they're in their districts. This is the time to get them at the library and the coffee shop and whatnot and ask them about this issue, where they stand and why, and your concerns about it. That's a very key time to do that is right now because they're here. Yes?
I was fascinated by the causal relationship between marijuana use and mental health issues, particularly on the high school principal.
Right.
More than one time, I've had parents who condone
Yes.
use because the child is self-medicating.
Right.
And so here you're self-medicating
Yeah.
15, 16, 17-year-olds for anxiety and depression when there's a causal relationship causes long-term
That's right.
anxiety.
It's a ticking time bomb. I mean, there's no other way to put it. So basically, it's something that in the short term makes you feel maybe okay because it's lowering inhibitions, it's doing things in the short term, but in the long term, it is setting it up for disaster. It's like saying I have a lot of pain, and rather than deal with it the proper way, 2 shots of whiskey feel really good when I have a lot. I mean, they do. Maybe 4 shots of whiskey feel really good when I have a lot of pain. But now I'm setting myself up for disaster if I'm doing that on a regular basis. And I think it's the same thing. And look, I sympathize with parents that want to do everything they can for their kids, and they make them feel better, and they think, well, it's not heroin, it's just a little pot. What's the big deal? They feel better. Oh, you know what? We have peace. That's okay. But it's really a bad idea, especially with today's marijuana, especially they don't even know what they're using in marijuana, in the kids' marijuana. So I'd be very concerned, but it's a very good point. Yes?
Similar question. I think this slide talked about the
I should repeat.
relationship between pot and schizophrenia.
Yeah. So,
Really a schizophrenic episode?
yeah, so the question was about pot and schizophrenia. I mean both a schizophrenic episode, but also long-term schizophrenia, chronic, multiple episodes. And actually, new research just came out finding that in Amsterdam, 50% of the new cases of psychosis, many of which will progress to schizophrenia, are due to high potent marijuana. 50%. I mean, that is, I thought when I read it, I read 5%. Then I called the guy who wrote the article. I know him, he's in England. He said no. I don't know if he was being sarcastic, dry British humor, but he wasn't. 50%. And that's pretty incredible. And so we're talking about a major factor. And also it's a really huge factor if you have the genetic predisposition, which you don't know if you have a genetic predisposition. And 23andme.com or whatever isn't going to tell you if you have that. It's not accurate yet. So we don't know if you have the genetic disposition for it. And is it causal for everybody? Definitely not. But for certain populations, we're finding that it is. And that's the scary part of it. Yes, sir.
I was just noticing on one of your slides when you talk about advertisements in the 50s
Yeah.
about cigarettes.
Yes.
And one of the advertisements,
Yes.
finally, or something to this effect, the facts about
Right,
smoking,
the facts.
which I presume was pro-smoking.
Yeah, it was.
I would guess. So in this issue,
Yes.
and we live in a time when everybody watches MSNBC, that's the truth.
Right.
That's the truth.
Right.
So there's all this information about
Lots.
that people aren't sure. Well, give me the truth.
Yeah.
Are you believe that your website is a dispensary, so to speak, of truth?
I do, because
Or are there other places?
oh, there are definitely other places. Yes, no, absolutely. Look, everything on our website, I will say, is reviewed by our scientific advisory board. These are the top researchers in the country. We're very careful with our words. I mean, frankly, a lot of people on our donors and stuff say, Kevin, you're too careful. They're not careful at all, so you should. But I don't believe in that. We got to stick to the science. We don't know everything about everything on this issue. We're still learning about tons of it. By the way, the marijuana plant is very complex. There are thousands of components. We're still in the teenage era, I won't say infancy, but of learning about it. We know a lot about it, but we're still learning about it, or maybe young adulthood era of it. And but I do think the website's good. I'm biased, obviously, because it's our website, but there are many other publications you should look at. So the National Academy of Sciences published one of the biggest monographs, 400 some pages, in 2017. That's a good resource. Lancet Medical Journal has published multiple articles on this issue. We do. We have links. The National Institutes of Health have a lot of, so we have links, and there are other, we're not the only one, there are others. But you're right. There are people say, well, we're right, and you're right, and all that. And again, I tell people, actually, don't take my word for it. Forget about my website. Go to established authorities. Read NIH. Read National Academy of Sciences. This is unbiased science, and you'll see kind of what I'm talking about.
Just one other thing. So you're against the legalization.
That's right. Yeah.
I was just wondering, are you in favor of medical or any other?
So the thing on medical is that there are components of marijuana that have medical purposes. And I don't think we should be voting on medicine or leaving. I don't think medicine should be left to the legislature. No offense to any legislators. That's not, unless your legislature are, have double PhDs in science and it's meant for science is medicine. It's not a popularity contest. I worry when something becomes a popularity contest. Does anybody remember Laetrile? Laetrile is the inside of an apricot seed that in the 1970s was pushed as a cure for cancer, I believe. And it was passed in multiple legislatures because of all of this testimony of people saying that it cured cancer, it was this, it was that, the government isn't telling us the truth, oh my God. And that was the only other time other than marijuana where we voted on medicine. And we voted on Laetrile, and multiple people died. There were a lot of problems. Every single legislature has repealed it. It's banned. It was a really bad idea. It was pseudoscience by an industry. I'm not saying this is the same thing with marijuana now, because I do think there are medicinal components within marijuana. I think you can do it the right way. I just happen to believe that of doing it through the legislature, let alone a popular vote, that's even worse maybe, is not the right way to litigate medicine. That's not really it's not a political thing. It should be scientific. And there are components of marijuana that have passed scientific muster, that have passed FDA muster, that are out there in the pharmacy. And I'm totally in favor of those. And I think there should be more research on those. I think we need more medicines based on marijuana. So I'm in favor of it, but let's not make it a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's do it the right way. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to mention two things, since you might not be able
Please.
to say them. One, as far as facts, and even though the website's good, Alex Berenson's book,
Yeah.
Tell Your Children, it's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has a history of marijuana,
Mhm.
a history of schizophrenia, and the studies that link psychosis
Yes.
to marijuana. And these are things that really weren't even known when I was in
Yeah.
medical school. The
Right.
links between, I wasn't taught that, so even a lot of doctors
They don't know.
believe in it, because after all, we just believe what we learned in medical school, we stopped learning. The other thing is, your Senator, Pete Harkin,
Mm.
he wants to hear from you.
Yeah.
I met with his office in Mount Kisco. He has a few emails, and I can give you them.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to hear from every single person here. He wants to know what you think. Please tell him.
Very good point. Thank you. Both good points. Thanks very much. Yes, Kelly.
I have a question about the bans that are coming up in the city.
Yes.
Bans.
Thank you.
I heard today that they've decided to do away with marijuana testing in the city of New York. The council
Yeah.
decided. And now there's a push to, Adrian Adams wants to remove testing of pregnant women.
Yes.
In the hospitals.
Yes.
It seems like the agenda is to get marijuana out of the child welfare.
Yes.
So I'm wondering about other parts of the country. Have
Yeah.
you seen a pattern of this where legalization is up or
Yes.
happening and then testing begins?
Yes, the pattern is the legalization, because they want to do the testing bans, because if you have legalization but then you can still test, you can't use marijuana all the time, and the goal for the industry is for you to use it all the time. So the industry needs to make sure that the workplace can't test for it anymore. That is how they are making their money. So yes, I have seen that. The pregnancy issue I've seen less of, but it's interesting that we're seeing it here. Kelly talked about how they're now saying that for pregnant women they shouldn't test for marijuana anymore. I got to tell you, the research on that issue with prenatal, but also postpartum, and sort of what happens to women and babies and fetuses with marijuana, it's scary. It's very scary. In fact, there are diseases that kill from THC to an unborn child. There's all sorts of things that I just don't know why. Again, I don't want to say we want to test the poor pregnant woman and she's positive until you're going to put her in jail when she's pregnant and she's going to get a life sentence. No one is saying that. And that's the straw man that's saying, well, we have to do this, Kevin, because otherwise you're going to put a pregnant woman in jail forever. No, we don't want to do that, but we need to know what's going on so that we can help and treat that and not act like it's not a big deal. Because it's a really big deal. And again, it's all part of, I think, we have swung from one extreme. We're on this total extreme in society. We're living in that right now, where we think this is no big deal. So all of these things happen when we're in this extreme. We were there with tobacco 40 years ago. We were in that extreme. You could smoke in hospitals. Doctors were smoking. You could smoke in the plane. You could smoke everywhere. Now with tobacco, we've gone the other way. And by the way, what happened when we went the other way? People started smoking less. So now the vaping thing has come, but the point is, when you push back, you can be successful, but we're this way. And we're really trying to bring it back to be more balanced. Yes?
So what is the smart approach to marijuana?
Great question. That's a good way to end it too. So what is the smart approach? I did not plan that or pay that man. I don't know who he is. It's a very good question. Nice work. You've done this before, exactly. What is the smart approach? I think the smart approach is prevention. I think the smart approach is you have a kid in school and they're using it. You need to get them an intervention. You need to get them help. You need to get them, maybe they don't need full treatment. Maybe they do. By the way, the number one reason kids are in treatment today is marijuana in New York State. So it's, don't tell me it's not addictive. I had someone tell me the other day, a kid say, Kevin, and again, if I wasn't laughing when he said this, I'd be crying. He said, Kevin, marijuana is not addictive. I said, well, how do you know that? He said, I know it's not addictive because I use it every single day. Again, if not laughing, we'd be crying. But the point is, the smart approach is prevention, intervention, treatment. For some people, it reminds me of speed limits. Let's talk about a speed limit for a minute. There are plenty of people who drive over the speed limit. And we have some officers in here. I have never done it in my entire life. But I've heard of people who did it. And the issue is, many of them do it and they don't get into a car accident. Most people do it and don't get into a car accident, by the way. Kind of a scary thing. Just like, by the way, most people who smoke don't get lung cancer. Interesting. Most people who don't wear a seatbelt don't die. Interesting. Okay, go back to speed limits. Most people who speed do not get into a car. However, if you speed, your chances of a car accident go up fourfold every 5 miles per hour. That's a lot. Okay, versus someone who's not speeding. So as a society, we said, we're going to have speed limits, knowing some people will speed, but we want to have guardrails because we want to have order. We want to have speed limits. It affects other people. You're going to hurt me if you speed. There's reasons why we have a speed limit. Now, if you get caught for going 5 miles over the speed limit, which has increased your chances for a car accident, we don't want to put you in prison forever, but we want to fine you. If you get caught going 10 miles and you do it twice in a couple years, you should probably go to traffic school and learn about it. 3 or 4 times, you should really understand the consequences. Maybe it's a hefty fine. Maybe it's a suspension of privilege. There's kind of a graduated thing. But we know people will speed, but we don't say, oh, Kevin, speeding laws don't work. Get rid of the speed limits. Does anybody say that? No. So I know people use marijuana today. I get it. And it's illegal, but they still use it. I know. Just like they speed. I get it. But by having that speed limit or having that marijuana law, it does overall, I think, protect society and deters some people, enough people, that if you got rid of that speed limit sign and you got rid totally of the marijuana laws, then you're opening it up to real problems. And I think with low-level possession, you treat it like a speeding issue. Now, if somebody is plotting to, fix their car so that they can go 120 miles an hour and they're like the drug dealer of the highway in that way, then yeah, you have to have more that is more serious. You need to have more serious consequences. So the SMART approach is prevention, early intervention, treatment, help if you need it. You're 16 years old and make a dumb decision. Yeah, I'm going to slap you on the wrist and tell you you better not do it again. You make another dumb decision a couple times, well, then you may have to pay some consequences because we want to deter it from happening. You do it in public, not allowed. You do it in other places driving, you have serious consequences. The SMART approach is a balanced one. It brings in public health with public safety. We're not going to want to put you in jail forever. We're not going to want to give you a criminal record because you made a bad decision when you were 18. You had a really bad lawyer and you ended up serving a night in jail, which is on your record. Now you can never get a job. That's overkill. We don't want to do that. So I don't think that's smart. But a lot of people are bringing up that instance and saying, this is why we need to legalize marijuana, as if we should get rid of the speed limit laws entirely. And I don't think we should. So it's a balanced thing. It's prevention, early intervention, and treatment. And it's not commercializing another, for some people, not everybody, addictive substance, which has grown exponentially in potency, which is now being driven by business interests to legitimize its use, promoted by celebrities as normal and okay, in different delivery devices that we've never seen before, that we don't even know how it affects your brain and your body. We're going way too fast on that. We need to pump the brakes, talk to our legislators, slow down on this, stop it from happening right now, learn from the other states because they've made a lot of bad decisions, not repeat those same mistakes. Thank you all for having me. I hope you learned something. I hope it was interesting. And I want to thank the coalition especially. Thank you. And Kelly is here and will be here. I'll be here for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, thank you all for coming. Feel free to come to any of our monthly meetings, help out in, if you have an hour or two, anything that you'd like to dedicate. We welcome ideas, suggestions, etc. So again, thank you all for coming tonight. There's refreshments in the back, and Kevin will be around for a little while to answer any other questions, and have a good evening. Thank you.